I'm BERNINA Expert Amanda Murphy, and I'd like to show you how I quilted Amethyst Jubilee. It features my Jubilee Silver line for Benartex. So the first thing was doing all the major outlining. I started by quilting the line between the border and the rest of the quilt, and then I quilted around all these big facet shapes. So on a long arm, going from the top down, but on a domestic machine, you could go from the center out after you secured the border. The border is really important to secure first, so you don't have shifting that happens, because then your border won't appear straight. So after I quilted around the facets, I quilted around the stars, and you can see here I quilted some of the major divisions within the stars and then went all the way around the star to finish that design. And once I completed this step, I had some quilting done throughout the quilt sandwich. Keeping the quilting density the same throughout the quilting process is really important when you're trying to get a square finish. So now I went inside those facets and I quilted the areas inside them. So I started, you can see I'm not bringing my ruler over until my foot is down, because I don't want to crash on my ruler. That's the most important thing to remember with ruler work. So basically, I quilted around this entire shape. And because the idea behind this quilt design was that it almost looked three-dimensional, what you'll notice is the dark fabrics are on one side of this faceted shape, and the light fabrics are on the other, the medium prints. And so because I wanted to create an illusion that this was like cut glass, I decided to treat this shape as one. So you'll notice I'm quilting all the way around that gray, the shape that's gray on one side and black on another. Okay, once I came back to the center, I started doing rays. And so you can see here I'm quilting a little angled out from the corner, and I'm stopping with the back of my presser foot there, hits the stitch line, the outline of the block. And now I'm going around a little bit, a quarter of an inch away from the edge, and I'm going to aim like I'm going back down into the corner. So I'm aiming, but I'm not going to quilt all the way into the corner. I'm going to stop short because I don't want the thread buildup that would happen. Now, instead of quilting back to that same point, I'm going to angle my ruler a little bit, and I'm actually using the lines on the ruler to do this. And now I turn my ruler and travel along the edge, parallel to the edge of my quilting area, and go back down toward the corner. Now I'm going to angle my ruler a little more. You can see it clearly here because it's not behind the foot. See how the edge of my ruler's on my previous stitch line over there? And I'm quilting back up. And I don't measure all these, but I do have an idea how many rays will fit into this area. So if 5 rays fit into the area, the center rays is going to be over the gray and the black side. Here I'm angling my ruler again. And notice I stop when the edge of my foot hits the edge of the design area. I'm not actually stitching over previous stitching lines. And now I'm angling back down in. And angling out again. Stopping when the edge of my foot hits the edge of the quilting area, and traveling around to fit in that last ray. And now this time I'm going to come straight back into the point where I started. And then I'm doing a few stitches to secure. Okay, so after I've done that shape, I'm going to do the next shape up. So this time I think I'll be able to fit about 4 rays into the area, but of course the first thing I need to do is quilt in the ditch around the same area. You could skip this step, but I kind of like the added definition it gives you, and it doesn't take that long with a ruler. This is a real boon for rulers because you don't have to rotate the quilt top every time. Okay, so I'm clipping that thread. I did a few stitches very close together before I got started. You can also end threads a traditional way by burying them and not doing those little close together stitches, but that takes time, and I didn't have it. So I quilt all the way around that area, and now I know I'm going to fit 2 rays on one side and 2 rays on the other, and I'm going to have those rays face the same direction as the rays below in the gray and black area. So now I'm going to angle my ruler a little bit, so I'm not stitching along the edge of the area, I'm stitching a little in, so it's angled a little in. And now I'm using the edge of my ruler, lining it up to go parallel to my quilting area, going about halfway up, and going back in. But I'm not coming all the way to the central point because I don't want the thread buildup. Now I'm angling out again, going up, going around. I'm going to stop before I get to that seam because I want my little divot there between the rays to happen right in the center. So I'm going almost all the way in, but not quite. And then I'm going to do a mirror image of this design on the other side. You know, if you're doing this on a domestic machine, you wouldn't be holding the ruler with one hand. You'll get better results if you hold the ruler with a couple fingers from each hand on the ruler and a couple fingers from each hand on the fabric. This is the last quilting I'm doing in this area, so I'm going to come back to the center of the block again. And there we go. So that's what the design looks like. So I don't know if you can see it here, but I've made some marks in these channels using my cutting ruler, which is much longer than my quilting ruler. And I'm connecting the marks using my quilting ruler. And I'm creating channels for ribbon candy. Now this wouldn't have to be ribbon candy. You could also use loops. You could use just a back and forth design. But I wanted some free motion to contrast with the very angular lines in this quilt. I thought it was important in terms of building up a texture. So I'm creating these channels that I'm later going to fill with ribbon candy. So here you can see I'm filling it with ribbon candy. And I want to stress, your ribbon candy doesn't have to be perfect. And I can guarantee mine's not perfect because it's not easy to do ribbon candy on an angle on a quilting frame. But it doesn't matter. What you're creating is a texture. So it doesn't have to be terribly uniform. It just has to contrast with the very straight lines in the rest of the quilt. I also quilted ribbon candy in these little areas. Now this was very tiny ribbon candy, so I can guarantee it wasn't perfect. You can see I'm creating the channels and I'm kind of loosely angling it along. I find that when you stand back from a quilt, you don't notice the little lines. If the little line's off, you're not going to see it so much. What you notice is the texture. And you also notice if your quilt's square. So that's why I spend time building up the density in my quilt tops. So now I'm going to angle it again. Now, I did not measure the angles. I just eyeballed it. And again, I don't think you'd see that. Our eyes want to form patterns. You know, your eyes will link one area of the quilt that's similarly quilted to another. And so you don't notice any little discrepancies you might see in terms of angle. So now I'm going to go in and I'm going to fill it with ribbon candy. This ribbon candy might again not be perfect. In fact, I can guarantee it won't because it's going to be really tight in that little corner. But the purpose of having it there is that it creates a channel of very dense quilting. And on either side of the channel, you have little areas of puffiness that contrast nicely. Now this is even more apparent because I use 2 layers of batting in this quilt. I use 2 layers of Eversewn bamboo cotton. I hope this video has helped you learn how you might create a plan to quilt Amethyst Jubilee.